Hey Tom, I think Charlotte may have spotted Prince William at Groundswell last week. I was just wondering whether you'd ever been in the presence of a royal. I know back in the 80s I went to the royal tournament once, and it was when Charles and Diana were there, and I was going up and up escalator as they went down a down escalator. So our paths kind of crossed, but that was about as close as I got.
It sounds like you almost rubbed shoulders. I'm afraid I've not been as successful in my travels as that. I know that Princess Anne is the Chancellor at Harper Adams, and the day that she did visit when I was there, I was not present, although we did get lots of videos on social media of people filming out of their dorm windows as the helicopter landed on the rugby pitches. But unfortunately, I was back home that day.
In bed, missing lectures probably.
Oi. Hello, I'm Tom Spencer, and welcome to Agonomics, your weekly digest of the economics of agriculture. Now, it may sound like I'm on my own, but producer Martin is lurking in the background. And as for Charlotte, well, she'll be bringing you a flavour of last week's Groundswell.
I'm here in beautiful North Hertfordshire in a sea of tents currently, having just driven through some of the most beautiful bucolic countryside on the way to Groundswell. Think of it like Glastonbury but for farming. It's an incredible festival-like feel for anything about regenerative and sustainable farming.
Keep listening for more from Charlotte at Groundswell later in the show. Plenty more to keep an ear out for as well. I'll be running through some of the latest stories to catch my eye, and I'll be answering another all-important question that some of you may have been too afraid to ask. A reminder, new episodes of Agonomics drop at midday on Wednesdays, so follow us wherever you listen to podcasts to make sure you don't miss a show. Don't forget, get in touch. We always appreciate hearing from you. Email us at agonomics@ahdb.org.uk. So, to kick off this week, I thought I'd give everyone a bit of an idea of what is Groundswell. We'll be hearing from Charlotte a bit later on, as she is lucky enough to be attending this year. But what is Groundswell? Now, it's an interesting event in the sense that it's not like every other event that's been around for decades and decades and is steeped in history of agriculture. It's actually quite a relatively new event. It's all about regenerative agriculture. That's the sort of main top heading of what it is. Started in 2016. Two brothers, John and Paul Cherry, arable farmers from Hertfordshire, wanted to create a space where farmers could openly explore conservation agriculture, sort of no-till farming, things around soil health, without a bit less of the commercial gloss of the traditional agricultural show. So what began as a small gathering, this has grown since 2016 into what is now a two-day event, attracting thousands of farmers, advisors, scientists, policymakers. And it's now, I know we've just been off the back of Glastonbury, it's seen as sort of the Glastonbury of regenerative agriculture, as they like to put a spin. So you get sort of field walks, live demonstrations, and big conversations about the future of food and farming. But before we go to Charlotte and hear about what she's been getting up to, first we're going to kick off with the news. So a few articles that we've got that are of note. I'm going to start off with something from the world of sheep. So the National Sheep Association, the NSA, has launched a groundbreaking sort of sheep meat project around traceability. In a sort of pioneering project, the NSA is working with Bayer Analytical to identify sheep meat by breed, age, and grazing location, effectively giving each cut of meat its own biological fingerprint. Using mass spectrometry, which is basically looking at tiny molecular markers that vary by animal and environment. The first phase of the project uses blockchain technology to create a secure, transparent food traceability system. Farmers in those areas are encouraged to take part, with costs for sample submissions covered. So please do have a search for that to get involved. It'll all be on the National Sheep Association website. Martin, I hear you've been chatting with Charlotte, and actually you might have found an article that is right up her street. Is that right?
Yes, thanks, Tom. I think we're going to summon the spirit of Charlotte with this particular story that I saw on The Grocer. Now, I know there's been several reports of late of retailers calling workers back into the office more and more. And to be honest, I'm not sure how many workers are solely at home these days. But this article that I read in The Grocer, apparently Lidl has become the latest supermarket asking for more of its office-based working staff to get back into the office. So it's asking them to work 3 days a week in the office instead of 2. For a bit of context, at AHDB, we're asked to work a couple of days a week in the office, and it still feels quite the novelty for me because obviously these rules came in during COVID. My old job demanded that I was actually in the office for 5 days a week because I was reading bulletins on the radio. So it's quite a hard task to do that at home with everything. But why would Charlotte like this particular story? Well, we know that as her role in the retail and consumer insight team, she does look at food service trends. And I know in the past, Charlotte's actually reported on the fact that commuting offers a boost to food service, particularly the food to go sales. So she had an article last year. It's all go for food to go. You can read that still on the AHDB website, ahdb.org.uk. And in that, she wrote that according to IGD, the UK food to go market is anticipated to see positive market growth over the next few years, and by 2028 is expected to increase in value by almost 40% on 2019 levels. So I guess with more companies, more retailers bringing their staff back into the office, it's going to mean a lot more commuting and a lot more buying the food to go to satisfy those cravings at lunchtime and what have you. So the main driver of the food to go service is the return of commuting. I don't know whether we'll ever get people back into the office for 5 days a week across the board, but it's interesting to know how it is still affecting our eating habits.
That's right. More commuters, more meal deals. That's what I hear from that one, Martin.
Yeah, what is your favourite meal deal, by the way? Mine's always a triple sandwich with a smoothie, and then if you can get one of the chocolate bars that used to be king size in the day, they're now duos. We're not kidding anyone. I don't share that second chocolate bar with anybody else. I don't save it for later. I eat it as though it is one continuous bar. But yeah, I always try to go for the triple sandwich. All day breakfast if I can.
I was going to say the exact same sandwich as that, literally. I was waiting for you to say it, the all-day breakfast triple, which I think it's Tesco's that come out each year and tell you what the most popular meal deal was, and that is the number one as the sandwich option. I tend to go for a more savoury snack, perhaps unfortunately cold sausage roll, but they're still pretty good. And my drink of choice, lemon iced tea. That's my curveball to put in there, for sure. And finally in the news, we have something that's come out from DEFRA, who have expanded its free vet visit scheme. So the major sort of change to this is the fact that they're now offering this more access to farms with multiple species under a single agreement. So funding health checks for all their herds and species, beef, dairy, pigs and sheep. So to give a bit of context to this scheme, it was launched in 2023. Scheme has been delivered to over 8,000 farms who have received a free vet visit, with more than 95% of participants saying they've taken action based on expert advice. So yeah, that key change now is that you'll be able to, if you are a mixed farm, say with, for example, beef and sheep, you'll be able to apply for multiple herds, as in multiple visits there, which I hope will be received well by farmers across the UK. That's enough from myself and Martin, whittering on about the news. Next up, after a quick break, we're going to hear from Charlotte, who has been at Groundswell, and we're going to hear what she's been getting up to in the world of regenerative agriculture.
Hi, I'm Gabriel Jesse, analyst at the AHDB, with a quick update on the grain and oilseed markets for the week commencing Monday, the 7th of July. Despite lifting due to situation between Israel and Iran, the UK feed wheat followed the downward trend seen in paddy milling wheat futures of late. closing just above this key support level of £175 per tonne. The downward pressure was driven by currency fluctuation, ongoing harvest pressure across the Northern Hemisphere, and larger than expected US grain stock levels. Maize remains a key focus as it enters a crucial stage of development. Heat in Europe is causing concern over yields, though crops in the US continue to look strong. Since climbing to a 2-year high following the Middle East crisis, Paris rapeseed markets have eased back to around £411 per tonne. Currency fluctuation have been a key factor, with the euro reaching a near 4-year high last week. Broader oilseed markets remain supported by optimism around the global biofuel demand, concerns over Canadian canola yield, and a surge in Indian palm oil imports. However, ample soybean supplies from South America, along with favorable crop conditions in the US, continue to cap price gains. Looking ahead, weather conditions affecting rapeseed in Canada and maize in Europe and the US as they enter critical stages of development will be important to monitor. To stay up to date with the latest data and analysis across arable, red meat, and dairy markets, head to ahdb.org.uk and click on Markets and Prices.
Hello, you're listening to Agonomics, and it's me, Charlotte, back from Groundswell, which through the magic of podcast editing you can hear in the background. As Tom mentioned earlier, Groundswell is a regenerative agriculture festival, which provides a forum for farmers, growers, or anyone interested in food production and the environment to learn about the theory and practical applications of regen farming systems. I attended as part of the AHDB team, delivering insight into some of the work which we do. And I wanted to give you a flavour of what was on offer, as well as what I got up to over the 2-day festival. And spoiler alert, I really don't think that 2 days is long enough, as I didn't get a chance to go around half of the talks I would have loved to have attended. I might have even had time to say hello to Prince William. But as it was, I just saw him in the distance. There really was a bit of something for everyone. So here are some of my highlights from day one. Kicking off with the panellists who took part in a discussion called Pastured Pigs, Beyond the Farm Gate.
So I'm Fred Price. The take home for me is that real systems change is not going to happen if we're all siloed and fragmented and isolated as individuals, pioneering little ideas here, there, and scaling them up. You know, change is beyond the kind of remit of one person or one organisation, and that we need to work together, and change happens through communities and network building.
My name is Song-Soo Kim, and the main key takeaway is, like what Fred says, change comes from a network, an ecosystem of various different individuals doing their own intense, smart thing, but coming together to create a network. Butchers, farmers, restaurants, all of them.
Hannah Thorogood. A key learning from this is how keen everyone is to communicate. So we have the Pastured Pig WhatsApp group that everyone is welcome to be a member of. Just find a way to join it. And how many people joined today. There was a lovely flow of people joining that WhatsApp group. And really that represents a truly grassroots supportive network where we can have transparency and autonomy to be able to work together in the way that we want to, whether that's pig farmers, butchers, producers, consumers, researchers, and all of those voices together can become very loud and strong, and it's just really, really powerful and inspiring.
I'm Amy Chappell. People should really take away just being able to have open and honest conversations with each other, being able to just sit down and chat, open your phone anytime and ping whatever's in your mind on the group, because you're going to get a response. It's a really lovely community, and I really think that we should be able to just build on that. There's no off topics. There's nothing that's sort of hidden, or we're completely honest, which I think is really hard to find sometimes in this industry, unfortunately.
Now on to the very small topic of AI, and I'm saying that quite facetiously. So I went to an incredibly interesting talk titled AI in Ag, What's Possible, What's Not, What Farmers Need to Know in Speaker's Corner. Now, AI is transforming agriculture as it is a lot of industries. So this panel was all there to look at how actually can farmers and land managers be sure it's working for them and not against them. So what are the wins that we can have for monitoring soil health metrics or robotic sensors or other tech to make farming profitable? Now, there was a great strapline that came from it, because I know for some people AI is quite a scary new approach to looking and managing and thinking about data. But there was this great strapline from the panel, which was AI is a tool, love it like you'd love your spade. A spade is great, but it's never going to take over your farming operation now, is it? So this was all about, in farming, we generate huge amounts of data. AI can be a great starting point, perhaps, for sense checking some of it, for having a look through and seeing, what might be possible. It's not foolproof. It's not completely going to revolutionise your farming, but it can be incredibly useful as that tool for helping you to make some of those decisions on farm, for how, what the real world opportunities might be for mapping and empowering you to make your own decisions. Part of my role at Groundswell was taking part in a panel discussion titled Green Food Rebellion: How Can Farms Feed Values, Not Just Bellies? The aim was to explore what consumers want from food, whether they really care about sustainability, how those wants and values are communicated back to farmers, and whether they actually influence decision-making on farm. Hosted by AHDB's Emma Steele, I covered the consumer aspect of discussion and was joined by Will Mayer of Yo Valley Farmers and James McCartney, a Nuffield scholar and farmer. And here's how we felt it went.
Yeah, I think I'm a bit biased, but I think one of the key points that came out of it is that farmers are one of the most trusted people in the supply chain, and we need to keep that trust. We're doing some brilliant things. We just need to shout about them, keep doing them and do better.
Yeah, definitely. I was going to say stuff that you were saying, James, about the different processes you're putting in place. And it was very refreshing that all of us were agreeing. There was no fighting on the panel, was there? No one was saying anything different to each other. But how do you think it went, James?
There was no fighting on the panel, and more importantly, there was no one standing up and heckling me, which was always positive. So there was lots of nodding heads when I was not nodding, falling asleep, but nodding, agreeing with me when I was saying what I was thinking.
We actually got a round of applause before we'd actually started, so that's a first.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. So it was always great to talk to people about what we're doing.
Did you hear that, Emma? We'll have him back next year then, it sounds like. Amazing. What about you, Will? How was it being called Yo and Yeo within the same sentence, I think it was, unintentionally as well by Emma?
Guys, it's fine. We don't need to dwell on it. You can call it yo, anything that you want, as long as you sort of talk about it. That's absolutely fine. No, but it was amazing speaking to people. Obviously, it's always great talking about agriculture, and really engaged audience as well, which is fantastic.
It is always refreshing, isn't it, when you're with people that actually are interested in what you're talking about. And I think now we're all going to go to the beer tent and grab a pint. And I'm sure you will all be pleased to hear that we did in fact get that pint, albeit mine was a Prosecco, once, of course, all my duties were complete. Day 2 started bright and early back on the AHDB stand, and it was great to have so many valuable conversations with our levy payers and stakeholders. In fact, one chance interaction sparked my retail interest when barcodes were used in the same sentence as worms.
Hello, my name's Larissa Collins and I'm from Ferra Science Limited. I'm a principal entomologist there.
Amazing. So I just met Larissa and we were just talking on the stand about a really interesting project that she was undertaking, and it was all about wireworms.
So wireworms are a massively increasing problem in the UK. They're munching their way through potatoes, carrots, destroying fields of onions, lettuces. They'll also eat maize, sugar beet. So it really broadly across a lot of crops are becoming much more of a problem. There are about 60 species of wireworms in the UK, but only about half a dozen of them are actually crop pests. But you can't actually tell what they are just by looking at them. You can get them to genus maybe, but you certainly can't tell what species they are just without looking down a microscope even. So we had an industry-funded project. It's one of the Ferra Enigma projects, which you can find out more about on our website. And we worked with our industry partners to look at what were the gaps in knowledge around wireworms and what did we need to do to help them to combat that problem. And the first thing was, how do we actually identify them? So we collected lots of adult click beetles, sequenced them, and used those sequences to develop DNA barcodes as a way of identifying the larvae. And we're just launching a new service where you can send us samples of wireworms and we can then tell you what they are. We can also give you advice on how to find them and provide bait balls that you can put in the ground to help collect them. And we can also tell you what size they are, so we can tell you what larval instar they're at, which is quite important if you're targeting control measures, whether those are cultural control measures like tilling or putting in particular cover crops, or whether those are biological control measures like entomopathogenic fungi. So we hope this is a service that will basically help people to make better risk assessments of fields before they put crops in. And there are things that you can do in the rotation leading up to putting a susceptible crop in to help you to reduce the populations of wireworms.
So it's all about what you can do in quite a simplistic way, thinking about it from a very macro sense, that you're not wasting money by putting in a crop that's going to get destroyed by the worms. You're not necessarily treating when you don't need to treat. And seeing as there's only 30 of those 60 species that are going to be pathogenic, actually, some of them aren't even going to be an issue at all, are they?
That's absolutely right. And one of the partners on our project found lots of wireworms in a field, but then knew what they were, so went ahead and put potatoes in there anyway, and it was absolutely fine. So there was no treatment needed. Didn't have to move that crop to a different field or something. It's to help people save money and grow better crops and not have their salad potato crops refused, basically.
So all about using natural methods a lot of times, I suppose, as well.
A lot of it's about cultural control. Yeah, so it can be tilling using particular cover crops. We have got a follow-on project just starting, which if people still want to join, they'd be more than welcome to if you want to get in touch with me.
So I've just come out of a talk, incredibly interesting, titled From Fork to Field, Bringing Regen Mainstream. Now, I had a brilliant time, and it was all about how we can spread the message of regen beyond a farming community. How can we hit that and get that out to consumers? What are the ways and the messages that they're going to be connecting to? I've just caught up with an attendee who's going to give me her top takeaway from the event.
So it was a great talk this morning, and it is clear that the consumer can't really connect with regen agriculture, as most people even in the food industry can't connect with it. So the message is really to keep it simple for consumers. The two companies the panel were producers of ready meals, and they keep their messaging simple. They emphasise that their products are not ultra processed foods, that their labelling is clean, and that their ingredients are of high quality. Therefore, that little bit extra is to be paid instead of buying more cheaper, buy better quality foods for your household, and buy less. And so we have less food waste as well.
So it's all like a complete win-win. And I think something that also fits in really well with the AHDB sectors. So for red meat and dairy, we want to be encouraging British produce. We want to be encouraging having that high quality produce and making sure that people can enjoy their foods. You'd be forgiven for thinking that coming to Groundswell and lots of branding here is all about love your soil, soil health, worms in soil, insects in soil. That's all that there's going to be here to talk about. However, it's more to the picture than that, isn't it, Emily?
Yeah, it certainly is. So soil health isn't the only indicator of environmental health, and I chaired a panel today on the AHDB stand, which was named From Runoff to Resilience, Managing Nutrients for Cleaner Water. So we covered why clean water is important, what it matters for public health, for the environment, for farmers, and collaborative approaches that farmers should be taking with bodies such as Catchment Sensitive Farming and the Environment Agency to have the biggest impact on retaining nutrients within soil, which of course is important, but keeping our waterways clean and healthy.
Definitely, and that is something from our consumer research at AHDB that we do know is growing in importance to consumers about what's going into our waterways and keeping those as clean as possible. So, Emily, what would be your top takeaway from your panel session this morning?
Oh God, it's hard to just have one. I think if I can have two. So from a farmer's perspective, understanding farming rules for water, those principles of crop need, what you've got in your soil in terms of indices already, and having a nutrient management plan, applying any fertilizers or nutrients, muck, slurry, according to those requirements, and then kind of within a industry approach, talking to catchment sensitive, talking to the Environment Agency, understanding what kind of cluster groups there are in your area. I think we can have a much bigger impact on your local environment if you're working as a cluster group. It's not just your farm that's impacting the waterway health, it's everyone around you, which includes water companies and other landowners as well.
If I can leave you with any impression of my time at Groundswell 2025, yes, learning is a key feature. However, just as importantly, it's about connecting with others in the industry and maybe also having a fabulous time dancing at the Earthworm Arms Big Top Tent and enjoying the real festival vibes of the events. Even earwigs falling on your head and sharing your duvet in the tents didn't dampen the mood. That's it for me, and after a short break, Tom will be back answering this week's question all about land sparing and land sharing.
If you're looking to bring new talent into your business, then the Pig Industry Scholarship Programme could be for you. Known as PISP, the initiative developed by AHDB, the National Pig Association and Harper Adams University recruits highly qualified agriculture students into the pig industry and associated trade. It's a fantastic way for farm businesses to gain staff and help train the next generation by offering valuable hands-on 12-month work placements. The deadline to express your interest for the 2026-27 academic year is Monday the 2nd of September. For more, visit ahdb.org.uk and search for Pig Industry Scholarship.
Welcome back to the Agonomics podcast with myself, Tom Spencer, and producer Martin in the background. Some very interesting stuff we've heard from Groundswell. I am very jealous of Charlotte having attended, as I know I've seen videos on social media now of one half of Groove Armada, Andy Cato, giving his best on the DJ sets. And the other famous face in attendance, I've spotted photos from last week of a certain royal Prince William in attendance. I wonder, Martin, if you had the choice of meeting Prince William or Andy Cato from Groove Armada, who are you choosing?
It's got to be Andy Cato, just simply Groove Armada, one of my favourite bands in my early to mid-20s, shall we say, at the river, sampling that classic old Cape Cod. So, it'll be Andy for me. And nothing against Prince William, but at some point he's going to be king. And it's a bit like when you grow up with footballers. Footballers are always older than you. And then gradually, as you get into your late teens, early 20s, you start becoming older than some of the footballers. I am now older than football managers. And so having grown up with the Queen and grown up with King Charles, for the next monarch to be younger than me, it's going to be a weird feeling.
I'm afraid that will only happen to me when the second in line to the throne actually gets there. But fingers crossed that's not for a long, long time.
No, indeed. But Andy Cato, obviously farmer himself, and features on a popular television series, doesn't he?
Exactly. So moving on to the big question of the week. Martin, have we got something for us?
Yes. So I know this is a question that's been talked a lot about in the office. And if anyone listening does want to actually submit a question, then agonomics@ahdb.org.uk is the email address. But the question for this week is, I've always wanted to know the difference between land sparing and land sharing.
Very topical, given we've just been talking all things Groundswell. This is quite an interesting question about where can farming across the world or even farming in the UK, where can it move to? So land sparing, land sharing, let's just give a bit of a background on what these two are in terms of what the ideas of where agriculture could be moving to in the future. So land sparing is about producing food potentially more intensively on the best land that we've got so that other land can be set aside entirely for nature. You might push yield on your top performing fields while turning unproductive corners, field margins, or rough ground into wild areas, wetlands, or trees. So imagine you've got your garden at home for those non-farming people. Land sparing is growing all your veg in the small, super productive raised bed nicely in that side of the garden, so you can leave the rest of the garden wild for the birds, the bees, and the butterflies. So you're concentrating production in that sort of one place. Counter to that, you've got the idea of land sharing. So land sharing takes a different approach. Instead of separating farming and nature, it's about blending them all together. That could mean farming with hedgerows, cover crops, low chemical inputs, or livestock systems that mimic sort of natural grazing patterns. Every field is still productive, but it also houses a habitat. So let's go back to that garden. It would be like planting vegetables, your flowers, your herbs, your pollinating friendly plants all mixed together. You're still feeding yourself, but you're also feeding, for example, the bees. You might not quite get as much output per square metre, perhaps, but your whole space works for nature and food together. So the big question we're having in agriculture is which approach is better? It depends who you ask, really. You've got your land-sparing advocates that say it's more efficient. You get large, undisturbed habitats. So you've got that sort of like best of both worlds in those two separate areas. And you potentially can still look at meeting those food demands, as long as crucially we can identify which areas are productive and which areas are less productive, and we can actually begin to separate those. Now, the land sharing areas, wildlife belongs, they could argue, is throughout all landscape. It fits better with your regenerative models, as we've been talking about at Groundswell, and those mixed farming systems. Many UK species actually depend on those traditional farming practices anyway. So it's a very, very tricky area in terms of where we go. Most farms already do a bit of both, to be fair, pushing wheat yields on those best blocks and then just leaving that tricky headland. It might be a woodland that's next to a field where the woodland overshadows a corner of that field. Well, maybe it might impact that yield. It gets less sun in that corner. That's where putting in a bit of a wildflower mix, and crucially, it's looking at those government schemes that can work in conjunction with that idea. So whether that be ELMS, SFI, those sort of schemes that can deliver a financial gain alongside the productive areas. But yeah, it's keeping those sort of wildlife-friendly hedges, margins, or buffer strips around alongside the productive area, or, as we've talked about with that regenerative side of things, it's doing that in conjunction together. You've got your min-till operations, for example. You've got organic farming, as we mentioned when we were talking with Annabelle not too long ago in terms of organic dairy. Or it's just using less fertilizer, less inputs. Although you're creating less outputs, it could be that those margins can work together. I think the future of agriculture, going down one of these routes, looks to be where we're going. And it'll be very interesting to see where this debate goes into the future, as it'll be something I personally will be keeping a track of.
Every day's a school day on the Agonomics podcast.
That's all we've got time for. Hopefully next week we'll be back with a full team, myself, Charlotte and Hannah, and we will be bringing you more information about economics within the world of agriculture. Don't forget, episodes drop every Wednesday at midday, and to subscribe to the podcast, turn those notifications on so you know exactly when our episodes drop, notification to your phone, possibly even drop us a comment on any platform that allows you to do so. And crucially, please do email in agonomics@ahdb.org.uk. And myself and Martin will see you next week.
Cheerio.